I'm James Rosenthal,
And I'm John Hess.
and today we are taking a look back at Back to the Future. All right, so Back to the Future. A look back is going to be a series where we are going to be taking a look back at a movie franchise as a whole. And this time we're going to start off with Back to the Future. We're going to talk about, what we liked, maybe what we didn't like. Maybe we'll have some disagreements. I have no idea. I think on this one maybe John and I are going to be pretty similar-minded, but I might surprise him. He might surprise me. Who knows? John, opening thoughts on Back to the Future as a whole, or anything you want to say to start us off?
I wish I could remember when I actually watched it for the first time, and I honestly can't. Can you remember when you saw it for the first time?
I saw it on VHS. I remember.
Well, I'm sure I did too.
I did not see it in the theaters. I was approximately about 1 year old when that was hitting theaters. So yeah, I remember my mom, if I remember correctly, of all places, we bought the VHS like at a grocery store or something like that. It was weird. I just had this weird memory. And my mom was like, "This is a really good movie. You need to see this." And I was like 5. I don't know.
Yeah.
And that was my very first memory of taking it home, watching it, and just laughing at stuff even that I didn't understand at the time.
Yeah.
Because you're young and you can't quite appreciate it as much as when you get a little older. That was my first memory of it, and I can't remember, but Back to the Future 2 and 3 I didn't see till a little later, because again, my family didn't have a lot of money, but I think we probably rented 2 and 3. If anything, but I know we had bought the first one.
I can't remember if I saw Back to the Future 1 in the theater or not. I'm pretty sure I saw 2 and 3 in the theater, because especially 2, because I remember at the end of 2 they did the whole by the way, we've already made Back to the Future 3, and here's a preview of it coming next summer or whatever it was.
That's right. They did do that.
So I was like, that was weird. I remember that being the first time that happened. When did Back to the Future come out? What year was that?
I want to say it was. The movie came out took place in 1985. I want to say it probably came out around that time.
Yeah, yeah, because I would have been like 6
right
when it came out. So yeah,
right, and so yeah, the first movie comes out, and I watch it, and I will tell you this, and tell me if you agree with this, because this is kind of my perception of how the general audience takes Back to the Future. I think that the general audience really likes the first movie. I think there's a general dislike for part 2, and I think that people really like the third one.
I would agree with that, yeah.
That's the public perception, and I differ from the public perception in that viewpoint.
You like number 2, I guarantee it.
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
I do.
I figured that.
And so I think that's kind of where we differ, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself.
Yeah.
But we will kind of talk about the first one, and I'm not going to go beat for beat. It's Back to the Future.
We've all.
But I'm also not going to avoid spoilers either, because if you haven't seen Back to the Future, what rock are you living under?
There's something very wrong.
Stop this podcast right now. Go watch it, and then come back, and you can enjoy reminiscing with us about.
Yeah, if you're listening to this now before seeing Back to the Future, then that's just wrong.
It is wrong.
You need to stop. Go watch it.
Regardless of listening to this or not, go see Back to the Future.
Exactly.
Because it's definitely worth your time, and it's an all-time classic. It kind of came out at the time when Michael J. Fox was kind of the thing on television from Family Ties, and I know he shot this movie while at the same time filming episodes of Family Ties, and he had to juggle that schedule.
Well, and there's the whole thing with that where he wasn't the original Marty that's who they wanted.
Right.
Was Michael J. Fox, but you have Eric Stoltz in there for and some people say he was there and they shot the majority of the movie.
Mm-hmm, they did,
depending on who you talk to about it. So,
and you can find those Eric Stoltz scenes online too if you look.
And I think they actually, when they put it out as a trilogy, I don't know what what anniversary edition. I think they included those on the Blu-rays.
Yeah,
I believe.
the Blu-rays for sure. They included those in on as a special feature. So, but I think they're also out there online too. So I mean, they're definitely worth looking at. And I think that they stopped production and they got Michael J. Fox. I think that was the right move.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I don't think it would have been nearly the same with Stoltz as McFly.
I mean, Eric Stoltz is a great actor, but he did just not the same as
Right.
Marty McFly. Well, and I also heard that they had a different actress too to play Jennifer, but because Michael J. Fox was so short and she was tall, they had to get rid of her and get the other actress.
Yeah, Claudia Wells.
Claudia Wells.
Yeah.
Who then they replaced in Back to the Future
Yeah,
2 with
yeah.
Elizabeth Shue.
And I want to get to that because I will talk that again, this is something I don't think a lot of people talk about. Maybe I'm in the minority here. I'm sure John will let me know, but I really liked Claudia Wells as Jennifer in the first Back to the Future. She brought something to the role that was very subtle and nice to kind of counter. I mean, because she was kind of Marty's rock in the present day when Marty is like down on himself and he doesn't really, he's like, oh, what if they say I'm no good and all this stuff. She's kind of there to say, no, you're really good. This is like, she's kind of his rock, and it's kind of nice to see that, and it's a nice relationship, and I liked what she brought to it because she wasn't over the top with her role, and she really brought it home.
I would assume she was basically an unknown.
Right.
I had never seen her in anything before that, and I don't think I've seen her in anything since. So,
right.
Yeah, it was definitely different. And then at that time, I think Elizabeth Shue was in a lot of stuff.
She was, yeah. And, I to me, I thought I really didn't like her as in the Jennifer role.
Well, it's just funny that she was in Back to the Future, and I know we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves a
Yeah.
little bit, but she was in Back to the Future 2, but, I mean, she really wasn't at all.
Right, in 2 and 3.
Her role was very limited in both 2 and 3.
But the scene she was in, I really didn't like her. Especially in 2 when when at the very beginning, she's in the DeLorean and she's this over the top she's just she's too much.
Yeah.
She's too much, and so I really didn't like her in the scenes that she was in. It's like Marty downgrade.
Yeah.
But. But that's just me. But yeah, we are getting ahead of ourselves. But so I think the one thing about Back to the Future, as I look back on it, and what I really appreciate is that of the 3 films, it had the most heart and the most story and message, I think, to tell.
Yeah.
Because it's not only a story about the father-son dynamic where Marty, he may have self-esteem issues, but you know where he gets it from.
Yeah.
His pushover of a father who is ridiculed and harassed by a man named Biff Tannen, who is played... Thomas F. Wilson plays Biff, and I cannot say enough. I love Biff as a character.
Yeah.
He's one of the greatest film villains of all time. I love him. I love what Thomas F. Wilson did with the character. Just the biggest jackass you can possibly imagine. He's like a real life troll. I mean, like before trolls were a thing. I loved that, really. I just that whole dynamic between Crispin Glover as George McFly and Biff was great. And they started out just the way that relationship is shown to start out, where he crashes, where Biff is drinking and driving and crashes.
And it's all not his fault.
Yeah. I got beer splashed over me when I slammed into that car. Who's going to pay my cleaning bill?
How could you not tell me about that blind spot, McFly?
I get your
I never noticed a blind spot.
I get your car towed to your house, and all you got for me is light beer.
What are you looking at, butthead?
Say hi to your mom for me.
The casting choices in this movie are just really interesting. Like Crispin Glover, I mean, come on, like that is insane. Like,
yeah.
I've only seen like a few of his movies. Like I think before he did Back to the Future, he had only done a few things.
Yeah.
And I've seen, I think one of them, he had a part in one of the Friday the 13th. So I don't even know which one.
Like
but
2 or 3. It was one of the earlier ones.
In preparation for this, like I watched some YouTube clips of him in these movies, and it's like he just really has a way about himself. And I watched like old interviews of him on like David Letterman and stuff like that, and it's so interesting. I mean, and then there's the whole conspiracy with him about this film, how he wasn't in the second one, and I never knew that, honestly.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, I didn't know that until, I mean, I've known it within the past like couple years, but like I think just I don't remember why or how I found that out. And there was
Well-
a whole lawsuit where how they used his likeness, but they used a different actor. And
Right, right, right.
I don't know, it's crazy.
Well-
But anyway, once again getting too far ahead, but I just thought that the casting in this movie was just really kind of interesting.
It was, and Crispin Glover was off the wall as far as a casting choice goes, but they made it work, and I know
Yeah.
he was incredibly hard to work with.
I mean, you would assume that, like, because like you talk about like Thomas F. Wilson, like his character is just like terrible, but like in reality, he's like a really nice guy.
He is, yeah.
So, and then it would be the complete opposite for Crispin Glover, I'm assuming anyway. I don't really know, but
Yeah, because I heard he had he had a really weird, and it's Crispin Glover. If you know anything about Crispin Glover, this is not a surprise, but he had kind of this really weird idea of what George McFly was, and it was nothing like what the script said it was, and so there was always this fight between him and Robert Zemeckis on set about he all of a sudden he wants to go off the wall and do this. He has this weird idea one day, and they kind of have to have this fight. And I think that was the real reason why he wasn't cast in the second one. I think it was a combination of him being so hard to work with on the first one, but I think he also asked for like an incredibly absurd amount of money.
oh yeah, I'm sure.
For the amount of time that he was going to be on screen in the second film.
Which
so,
was not a lot, because I mean most of it could have and was done in like flashbacks from the second movie or from the first movie.
Yeah, so he didn't really have much in the second movie, but I think if Crispin Glover would have actually worked with these guys and not asked for a ransom, I think they probably would have had more for him.
Yeah.
He definitely was minimized in the second film. That whole role of George McFly took a back seat.
I mean, really, everybody was kind of minimized to a point. Like,
yeah,
that's why I didn't realize that he wasn't in that second film, because they used so much from the first film, and the only things that were different were scenes with Biff, and I don't even really know if there was any scenes different with Leah Thompson. Like, I don't really remember any scenes that were much different from her perspective either.
I mean, she may have had one or two,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Oh, like at the very end where they're talking to Marty, where he's outside, like the Marty from the future is outside, and the Marty from the future, but in the first movie, is inside talking to
Right.
them, and that's where you get the really interesting shot of the other actor who is playing Crispin Glover with like this weird face makeup on or whatever.
There's the one scene in the second one where Marty's in the back of Biff's car, and Biff sees Lorraine, and he goes up to her, and she has a dress for the dance for that night, and he's kind of talking to her.
Yeah.
I think that's a scene. Now, that could have been a deleted scene from the first film. I don't know the history of that, but then they also could have shot it, because that's kind of the funny thing about that movie. But
Yeah.
bottom line, great casting.
Yeah, for sure.
Also a great message about, this father-son relationship that starts off with, the biggest loser of a dad that you can have. But that Marty loves his dad. I mean, he's like, come on, Dad, stand up for yourself, I love that dynamic. I also think, though, the other part of this film is about friendship between the character of Doc, played by Christopher Lloyd, and Marty McFly himself, which, on the face of it, seems like the weirdest friendship in the history of friendships, but no one questions
I was
this.
just going to say, I love how, like, there is literally no question. There was never a question in my mind from the first time I saw this movie of why this kid wouldn't be hanging out with this old man with crazy hair and who makes a time machine. Like, there was no question. And then he just goes over to his place and plugs into this huge speaker
Yep.
and blows himself up, basically. Like, I didn't question any of that.
No, and
It
I
just
never.
seemed perfectly normal.
Yeah, and no one questions
It
even.
needed no backstory.
No.
But now I want one.
I know, right? Like, how did these two even meet in the first place? It's just kind of funny because like the movie starts out, because Marty McFly is like what, 17? He's in high school.
Yeah.
So 17, maybe 18. And Doc is a senior citizen by this point, and yet they're hanging out. How does that even happen? And how does a kid like Marty, who fancies himself a rebel, he's kind of a nerd, but he fancies himself. He's got a rock band, and he rides a skateboard around on the holding onto the backs of cars. How does a kid like that hook up with a wacky science nut, and yet let alone become good friends? Like he and Doc hang out,
like he's going over to Doc's house in the morning before he goes to school.
Right.
Like, who does that?
Right.
Who gets up early? I mean, is he just going over there because he wants to play guitar? Well, no, probably not, because if Doc was there, he wouldn't have let him because he didn't want to blow up the whole
right,
place.
Right. And
I don't know.
Because he kind of comes in going, "Hey, Doc, where are you?"
Yeah.
Like, so he was there to see Doc, but Doc was nowhere to be found because he's working on his time machine, which at the time, the time machine is built out of a DeLorean, which, if you don't know the history of DeLorean, I mean, that's a joke in and of itself. I don't think it plays well today because people just see the DeLorean and they're like, "Oh, that's cool," but that was a joke in and of itself, due to the man behind the car DeLorean, who it was a disaster. I mean, the whole thing behind the stainless steel car and the whole Coke thing and all of that, which is why the lines in the movie, Marty is incredulous. He goes, "You're telling me you built a time machine out of a DeLorean?"
Mm-hmm.
Like, at the time, I mean, that was funny. Just that it was a DeLorean.
Well, that's kind of funny because, like, yeah, you're right. Like, if you don't really know the story behind that, or if you don't really know anything about it, for some reason that line is still funny, but for a completely different reason.
Right.
Like it's just funny regardless.
Yeah.
Like, so that's why this movie, it still holds up.
It does.
It really does. Like, it's just one of those movies that you could show somebody now who's in their teens or something, and they would probably enjoy it.
Yeah, because no matter what, with that line, Michael J. Fox sells it. He just sells it. So it's like there's no question. I mean, and it's a great delivery of it.
Yeah.
That he is just completely floored why Doc would even do this. And then Doc launches into the speech about the stainless steel construction and all of this, and so it's really funny. I love the first film. I think it's a great film. I think there are parts of it that still get me emotional, especially at the end where Marty's trying to tell Doc, hey,
you're gonna die.
Save
buddy.
yourself, and Doc rips up the note. And I remember when I first saw that as a kid, it ripped my heart out.
Yeah.
I was like, no, But then if you watch closely, you see Doc stuff it in his pocket, in the past.
See, I
He
missed
doesn't.
that.
He doesn't throw it on the ground. I think your mind tells you he must have just thrown it to the ground, but you can actually see him put it in his pocket. It's a nice little attention to detail that they actually did for the payoff that happens.
Yeah.
At the very end of the film. I mean, again, this movie has great attention to little details. That, for instance, at the beginning of the movie, Marty goes to the Twin Pines Mall.
Yeah.
He comes back to the future after he runs over one of the pine trees on the farm where it used to be the mall, and now in 1985 it's the Lone Pine Mall, which I found pretty funny.
And that's that's also something that I didn't pick up on until later on.
Right.
When researching about this movie, not for this specifically, but just in the past.
Right.
So, yeah, there's a lot of kind of goofy little things like that that you don't pick up on, and that's what you're talking about. The attention to detail is definitely,
and that's kind of something where it's like, one thing about Back to the Future that I really like. It's kind of an example of, and I hate to sound like an old man when I say this, but they don't make them like they used to.
Oh, for sure.
And Back to the Future, one thing that it did, and a lot of comedy type films did back then, is that they didn't wait for the laugh. They set a line, and it was funny, and you either laughed or you didn't, and they moved on, and it wasn't like they're like, "Are you gonna laugh? Are you gonna laugh? Are you gonna laugh? Because this is funny." Nowadays in comedies, they do that kind of stuff where they're trying to pander to the audience, and it really drives me crazy because it makes it not funny. But I mean, that's one thing. But then there's a true story and heart to this film. You can tell that Robert Zemeckis and everyone, they really had a message that they wanted to put out there.
Like what you're talking about, this story, it's a good story and it has heart. Like, on paper, this movie should have failed, like miserably. I think they shopped it around like
They
quite a
did.
bit.
Yeah.
And like it doesn't surprise me because it's like, okay, you got a kid, because like just in and maybe if you would have had Eric Stoltz as that character, maybe it would have failed, or maybe it wouldn't have done as well, because I think Michael J. Fox, like, and maybe, I mean, we can only really say that because we have seen it with him in it and no one else. So, anybody else in that role would be strange, but like he just really sells it. He's like you said, he's kind of like nerdy, but he's also, kind of plays it off like he's, kind of a badass or whatever. But like there's a heart to him, and there's like an innocence to him where like when he's getting in all these situations, he sells it.
Yeah.
And it seems real. It seems real that he would be friends with this old man because he's some goofy old man, he sells it. He's making out with his mom at one point. It's not weird because like he sells it. He's like this innocent kind of kid,
Yeah, but it's kind of funny that dynamic, the mom and the son thing in the past, where I wonder how that played in the theaters and how controversial that must have been back in the mid 1980s.
And that's something that also like never affected me when I was a kid. Like I just never thought of it. I never thought of that weird. I thought it was funny.
Yeah, but I will tell you this: that would never play in a movie today. Not in today's politically correct society. That would get shot down.
That's what I'm saying. On paper, like this movie should have failed.
Yeah,
like, miserably.
And it's sold on the strength of its casting and chemistry between the actors. I mean, that's really where this thing just flies. Without the great casting and then there's just the chemistry between the characters, there's no way this movie succeeds. There's no way it comes close.
And I mean, and that makes perfect sense of why they had to shop it around so much, because like all of that stuff had to come together for this franchise to like not fail.
Right.
And it did, surprisingly, like on the strength of Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Thomas F. Wilson, and especially like in the first film, I mean, Crispin Glover, I mean, that was a great role.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he's a crazy dude, but I mean, that was a great role. And like everything just kind of fell together because you're rooting for the underdogs the whole time.
Oh yeah.
And like and I mean, Thomas F. Wilson did a great job too, because it's like I said, he's like a good dude in real life, but like he plays the jerk so well.
And he goes to straight evil territory in this film where he basically attempts to rape Marty's mom.
That's another, like, how would that have played now?
Right.
Like,
I mean, that was dreadful.
Yeah.
I mean, when you go back and you watch that, it's an incredibly emotional scene. And watching it, every time I watch it, I love the scene where George McFly, it's like, no, you leave her alone.
Yeah.
Like where he finally comes into his own, where he takes a stand and goes, no, this is wrong. You leave her alone.
I think it plays perfectly because he was such a, like, kind of a loser, kind of a, just not a strong-willed person, that he needed something that terrible to possibly happen to find it within himself to like, no, Biff, you leave her alone. Like, and then to just like where he's getting his arm like almost like, that's just a great scene.
It is.
So it's like you take something that terrible and it turns it into something like really good.
Biff is just straight up evil in that scene because not only has he just attempted to rape her, now Lorraine jumps on Biff, when he's trying to twist George's arm, and he pushes her to the ground, and then he starts laughing at her like it's really funny, and that's what pisses George off, and he floors him, and it's just the greatest scene ever. The whole thing and the music is fantastic in this film.
I was gonna say that too. The music like makes this movie.
It does.
It's all these things had to come into place: the casting, the script, the effects, the music, especially like. And I'm talking about like the actual composed music.
Yes.
But I'm also talking about Huey Lewis and the News, man.
Oh yeah.
Like I didn't know who they were, and then I saw this movie. I was like, I really like those guys.
Yeah.
you know?
And there's just so many good things in this film that just it all comes together. It's a really weird movie. I mean, on the face of it, when you actually look at all these little weird components, it shouldn't work, but it does.
Yeah.
And it comes together, and I just love this film. And there's the great ending, where Marty has to hit the pole at just the right time and go back to the future. And to wrap this up, he goes and he sees Doc get shot again, and he runs down there and he's like, oh my gosh, he's dead. And Doc pops up and like, yeah, you're like, yeah, like, what's going on? And he pulls out that letter that's all taped together, and I just love the line where he's like, where he's like, what's this talk, all this talk about the space-time continuum and all this, and then Doc goes, well, I figured, what the hell? And, and I thought that was fantastic. Like,
well, yeah, because like, so this movie, I think partially the reason that people don't like the second one as much is because there's a lot more of the time travel aspects to it, and it gets a little, it's not confusing to me, but it gets a little muddled, and it gets a little confusing.
Yeah.
Because like in the first one, it's like pretty cut and dried. Like if you don't think about it too much, it makes perfect sense. It's like, they went to the past, they changed some things, which changed the future for the better, and that was, pretty easy to understand.
Absolutely.
But then when you get into the second one, they like go to the future, they come to the present, they go to the past, and then they come back to a different future, and then they have to somehow fix that so they can go back to it's like all over the place. But it's like, so I think that might be partially why people are kind of, but I don't know. I liked the second one too.
Yeah.
I mean, and I will agree with you 100% that like the third one it's just a crowd pleaser. Like it's definitely not the best one, but I would agree with you. I think people would go 1, 3, and 2.
Yeah,
for sure if they were going to do an order of it.
And that's my impression of it. And let's start to kind of get into 2 as we transition here, because Marty gets back, and at the end of the first film, Doc comes from the future, and Marty, what happens in the future? Do our kids become assholes or something? Or all that, or do we become assholes or something? And he goes, no, it's your kids. We got to do something about your kids, which. It was kind of funny because they never intended there to be a sequel, actually. It was just kind of a funny ending that they filmed at the time. But then Back to the Future became a success, and they had to use that because where else do you go?
And see, in my mindset now, like, I also didn't realize that. Like, my mindset now, I just automatically assumed that was going to have a 2. And I mean, it was definitely going to have a 3 because, like I said, at the end of 2, they had basically a preview for 3.
Yep.
But like, I 100% thought because of that ending in 1 that they were going to have a 2.
Yeah.
But like, that's the mindset now, because literally every movie is set up for a sequel, if not a trilogy or a quadrilogy.
And back then, they didn't have these mega movie franchises. They were really rare.
Like, I can't even. I mean, other than like Jaws.
I mean,
or Star Wars, but I mean that was automatic. That was
and
planned
Star Wars
out for
and Star Wars was one
movies.
of the first ones where it really actually took off, and they did it.
Yeah.
And I remember, I mean, and outside of horror, because horror has always been this, like, let's do 27 movies.
Yeah.
Once Halloween kind of came on the scene, and then Friday the 13th and all them kind of followed. But this film, they weren't planning for a second one, but then they did. And then all of a sudden, some actors didn't want to return. So then again, like we talked about, we had Elizabeth Shue they had to reshoot that scene at the end.
Yeah.
With Doc coming back, and then they go to the future, 2015, the future of 2015. And where everyone has a flying car and self-drying jackets and power laces and hoverboards. All those things have come true.
I mean, they were right. The Cubs did win the World Series.
They were right about that. That was one thing they did get right.
So,
and I don't think we quite made it to Jaws 17 yet, but I know Hollywood's working feverishly to get there. So,
no, they just made Megalodon instead.
No, that's true.
Or the Meg, I should say.
That's true. Yeah. Yes. That's true. I mean, if you include all of the Jaws ripoffs, I'm sure we're well past 17 at this point.
You could probably jam like Sharknado in there too, probably.
Yeah,
so we're probably getting into the teens.
Oh yeah, I'm sure we are. So yeah, because those are all in the same spirit. So if you count those, absolutely. But it was kind of funny because, when you talk about that scene at the beginning where Marty sees that the Cubs win the World Series against Miami. Miami didn't even have a team at the time that they shot this film. And so again, they get that right, like it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that part was actually eerily true.
Well, and they had like the 3D kind of virtual reality thing with the shark. I mean,
right,
that's kind of true. Like they're getting to that point,
right,
as far as like theater productions, like getting you out to the theater, like with the whole 3D aspect and stuff like that.
Now, I know the one thing that people really want is a hoverboard. I say screw that. I want my flying car, and I want it now. Okay? That's the one thing out of this film that I want. Hoverboards are okay, sure, whatever, but I was never really a skateboarder in the first place, so what would I do with a hoverboard? Power laces? That's okay. Self-drying jackets, my jacket, I don't need it to self-dry.
Self-dry. Yeah, we should actually like go over Back to the Future 2 and kind of see what stuck, what actually occurred. I mean, they got a lot right, like the multiple TVs or the big screen TV in the room. Not quite.
That's true.
Not quite
With
what
the-
it is now, but
And of course, it's comical because they have screens within screens, and it's
Yeah.
like, they got a
I
whole
want to see
wall.
channel 7, channel 23, channel 750.
But they did get right that you could talk to your TV and it'll
Yeah.
turn on and do what you want. So, I mean, there's a lot of smart technology now that Back to the Future kind of got right.
Yeah.
No, you can't hydrate a pizza. Um,
You can't just say fruit
yeah.
and it comes
And
from
it
the
comes
ceiling.
down, it bounces down, and you got fruit for you.
I mean, I guess we kind of have the glasses. Like, I know the Google Glass kind of.
Yeah, and we
where
have
you could watch stuff on it.
like the thumbprint stuff, like not necessarily.
Yep.
I mean, we do have it for doorknobs. I'm sure the RFID stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that kind of stuff came true, and that you could just kind of put your thumbprint up and pay for stuff as well, like the cab drive and all that kind of stuff. We have that kind of stuff with our
Yep.
smartphones. So again, there's a
Or
lot
just
of stuff.
Tap your phone and
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff that Back to the Future that if you look at it, some of that stuff didn't really get popular till more like 2016, 17, 18.
Yeah.
But it's here.
They
and
were on the right track.
yeah, they knew where we were going, and generally speaking, I don't know if they just had a scenic channel where you just get to.
I mean, they kind of have. They have like a fireplace channel.
And that's true on YouTube. If we include YouTube, they have that kind of stuff out there.
That's
So
true.
okay, if we're including that, they definitely have it. And Back to the Future, I'm going to give that to them.
Yeah.
Because people use YouTube and stuff as TV now, anyways, with the smart TVs. So I'm totally giving that point to them. But yeah, no, they came up with a lot of good stuff. I don't think they'd ever do a Michael Jackson themed restaurant. The Cafe 80s.
The Cafe 80s.
I think due to events, but I think that was kind of a swing and a miss. But
Yeah.
they couldn't predict some of the stuff that happened. But one scene that I do want to bring up, because the nerd in me just needs to do this, is when Marty goes into the Cafe 80s, and what's that video game he plays?
Gunsmoke.
Something like
Or
that.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and these two kids come up to him.
Mm-hmm.
And the one kid says, "You have to use your hands. That's like a baby's toy." That kid is Elijah Wood,
Yep.
who plays Frodo in Lord of the Rings. So if you didn't know that, there's your trivia for the day. I just like to point that out because it's kind of funny to see that little kid and go, "Oh wow, yeah, he's going to be a big thing for a minute," and then fade off into obscurity right after that. But I mean, I really like this movie. It's a darker take. It kind of goes back, and I think that's what some people don't like, is that it kind of retreads, quote unquote, over the first one. We're going to go back to 1955, and now we're going to, see things from a different angle. But I kind of like it. I think it
yeah.
works.
I kind of liked it too. I think it's because I'm such a fan of the first movie that I don't mind that they kind of go back over it, and because you can kind of see different little things that happened like after this scene, and
Right.
and this was happening while this was going on, and it's just the kind of nerd in me. But I also feel like even though they retreaded the first movie, I feel like they, in the aspects of the movie where they weren't in the past, I feel like they didn't just use all the same bits and jokes and things from the first movie. I mean,
Right.
they kind of did a little bit when he goes into the Cafe 80s, a little bit, but it's like they also did that in 3 as well. So
Well,
it's like, but so I like that they kind of
introduced the chicken thing in the second movie here, because that never was a thing in the first movie. And again, I never questioned it, but
Yeah.
it's kind of funny that all of a sudden, hey, what's the problem, McFly chicken? And no one calls me chicken. That was never in the first Back to the Future.
I didn't even realize that now that you're bringing that up.
Right.
Huh.
And all of a sudden, it's in the second movie. I never questioned it. It was just a thing all of a sudden, and there we go.
Huh.
Like Marty all of a sudden has this thing with being called a chicken. It kind of comes out of left field, honestly.
It's true.
But it worked for what it
But it
was.
worked,
I
yeah.
didn't question it, and no one else has seemed to question it. I've never heard anyone else bring that point up and go, "Hey, hold on."
If you would have just asked me that, and you wouldn't have told me that it wasn't in the first movie, I would have 100% thought that it was in the first movie at some point. But now thinking about it, yeah, you're right. It's never in that.
Yeah,
In the first film.
never. And I don't know where that came from. I don't know whose idea that was, but it's there. We have this fun with Marty getting to play about 10 different roles in his family in this movie. He plays his daughter, he plays his son, in all these different characters, which is actually kind of fun for him to do. But one thing we did not talk about in the first film, and I need to bring this up, Strickland, the character of Strickland.
Yeah.
I love him. He is played by James Tolkien, and he does a great job in both of these films. But one of the things that I just wanted to get that out there because I really like him in this movie. I think one of the things that I like, and I think you were alluding to this about the 1955 scenes, is it's actually kind of a bit of world building when you get to see these extra tidbits and like Lorraine buying the dress and all of that kind of stuff that makes it feel like an actual world that and I liked that personally. But then we have those Marty going back to 1985, I've got the almanac and
Yeah.
but Doc throws it out, and that's what starts the whole, downward spiral of the old Biff getting it and going back to 1955 to give it to the young Biff, which I love that scene, by the way. The good old split screen effect where they're in the car in the garage, and finally, I love this. I love this moment where he gets the young Biff gets the almanac, and he goes, "Now why don't you make like a tree and get out of here?" And older Biff hits him in the back of the head, and he goes, "Leave, you idiot, leave! It's make like a tree and leave. You sound like a damn fool when you say it like that." Like I love that little. I don't know. I just thought it was funny. The old Biff finally gets it after all this time. And you kind of have to wonder how many years did it take before he actually figured that one out. But that was funny to me. And I do like that interaction where it's like Marty can't, and Doc's trying to tell Marty, you can't change anything that happened. So it's like Marty climbing up over the enchantment over the sea dance stage and like trying to make sure that nothing changes.
No, I liked all that stuff. I liked all the intertwined things.
No.
'Cause, like they didn't just legit just play the scenes. There was always something else kind of going on around them.
Right. Now, one question I wanted to ask you, is there anything about Back to the Future 2 that you didn't particularly like?
I mean, nothing really like pops out at me. No, not really.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, because I always I'm curious because people always kind of put Back to the Future 2 at the bottom of the queue when it comes to this trilogy. At least that's my experience, and I always kind of wonder why.
Well, I find in like finding out more about the trilogy and the second movie in general, and then like rewatching it and stuff, I actually liked it more. I
Yeah.
would say that when I first watched these three movies, I would have done the same thing: 1, 3, and 2, and like I said earlier, it was probably because it was kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
And just stuff like that. But like in kind of seeing the lore about it a little bit more, and then the whole Crispin Glover thing, and just all that kind of stuff, and watching it again, it makes me like enjoy it even more.
Yeah,
Kind of look
yeah.
into the details like even more and realize that it was kind of an impressive like thing.
And not only that, but they were filming Back to the Future 2 and 3 at the same time. They were filming them back to back. And it's still kind of funny how they filmed them back to back, but they feel like such different movies. I mean, it's actually kind of an amazing feat because any movie that's filmed back to back these days, it's really hard to, when you watch both of them, they both feel like the same movie a lot of times because they're filming them at the same time. So it's hard for directors to kind of switch that hat. But this is one of the first examples that I can remember, and I don't know if it's the first one ever, but it's one of the first I remember of an example of a major studio letting two movies be filmed at the same time like this. It became more common, not necessarily even after that, but I mean more like with Lord of the Rings and onward, that became more of a thing.
Yeah.
I think even Avengers Endgame and Infinity War were filmed back to back as well, kind of like that. So a lot of these, part 3, part 4, part 1, part 2 kind of things, back when that was more of a thing, were done that way too. watching this one, I will say this. I'm gonna go on record as saying this. This has one of my favorite endings of all time in movies. I love the ending to Back to the Future 2. I absolutely love it. I cherish it. I think it's fantastic. I think it's perfect. I don't think you could have ended it any better than when Marty burns the almanac, Doc's flying around, and the DeLorean gets hit by lightning, and Doc is gone.
Disappears. Yeah.
And then the rain starts, which is cliched, but at the same time it makes sense because the storms, it's a storm coming in, so it makes sense. Oh, and then this car comes up, and this guy gets out and says, "Marty McFly, are you Marty McFly?" And again, this whole scene is played so well because it's a guy from Western Union who is told to deliver a package at that exact spot at that exact time to a guy named Marty, and you know what's happening. Like, that you're putting it together in your head. Holy crap, this has to be, it has to be, right? And then he opens it up, and it's a letter from Doc. But one scene that I always want to point this out, because again, this is comedy at its finest. The guy from Western Union, he goes, "Are you Marty McFly?" And he goes, "Yeah." And then the guy is pissed, and he goes, "I've got something for you." And he reaches into his jacket, and he rips it out, and he goes, "A letter, Western Union." And you learn this guy is pissed because they made a bet whether or not Marty was going to be there. And the guy says, "Oh, it looks like I lost." And he gives a really sarcastic laugh. He's pissed that Marty was there. And I love that. It's this little thing. "I've got something for you." And he reaches in his jacket. It's like, whoa, he's got a gun or something?
Yeah.
But that's the reason why he was pissed. It wasn't just, a cheap laugh thing. So I appreciated that scene. A little bit of comedy in the midst of tragedy of losing Doc, and then you learn he's in the Old West. And one of the greatest lines, I just love this line, and it works so well because the guy goes, but I want to make a comment about this scene because there's one little flaw that I would have if this was me in real life, I would have completely changed this. But it's a great line, so it makes sense. The guy's like, "Hey, do you need any help?" And Marty goes, "There's only one man who can help me." And he starts running, and then the music swells up, and you cut back to Doc on the top of the clock tower.
Yeah.
As Marty's gonna take off, and like I just cheer at that moment. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, this is fantastic. And but before I get to the very ending of this film, which I love, now, okay, you're in the pouring rain. You're probably a couple miles out, and you need to get to Doc yesterday, right? This guy's got a car, and he says, "Do you need any help?" I'm going to say, "Yeah, can you drive me into town?"
They're pretty far out of town.
They are, because
like Lion Estates or whatever.
yeah,
right?
and I have to imagine that's got to be, what, at least a mile or two? Like, it can't be a short walk.
Yeah.
And you're in the pouring rain. You're not going to be like, you're going to run the whole way? Like, dude, no.
Well, they had to leave the time in there for the other Marty to.
That's true. And it's more dramatic if he
Yeah.
runs in. But still, I'm just saying, real life me, I'm asking that guy for a ride. He's asking if I need help. Yeah. Give me a lift into town, buddy. But anyway, and then Marty runs in right afterwards, and Doc is, of course, shocked, because he's so happy he just sent Marty back to 1985. And, I just sent you Back to the Future. And Marty's like, "Yes, you did send me back, but I'm back. I'm back from the future."
From the future.
Great Scott. And he
Great
passes out.
Scott.
Great ending. Fantastic ending. And then, as John said, then they immediately tell you what's going to happen in the third one. Yep. Here's a big collage.
Open up on this big, like, Old West scene. It's like, what is going on right now?
Yeah.
To be concluded.
Yeah.
Like, what is that?
I know. They give it all away. And that, there's no tension. I mean, you already know, but the movie just goes, "Yep, he's going to get back to the Old West. Here are some scenes of Marty in the Old West with
Yeah,
Doc.
right.
They do meet up again. Da 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 da." Like,
Yeah.
and it's so odd for a movie to give away the store like that. But I do remember, if you go back and watch old trailers, there's so many that just give away the whole movie
Give
back
away the
then.
entire movie.
I'm sure
Well,
that
I think they just wanted to ride I don't know the time frame from when they released 2 to 3.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming it probably wasn't. It was probably a summer to a summer, I would assume.
yeah, at least a year.
Yeah. So it's like, but I think they just wanted to continue the ride of hype from one movie to the next, and they wanted you to get. Oh, we got it. We just saw 2, and now we're seeing what 3 is going to be. Oh man, we gotta go to that.
Yeah.
So it was perfect because they had their advertising for that movie at the end of their other movie.
True
You
enough.
Paid to see the trailer for the next movie.
Yeah.
So like I don't know how much advertising they actually did on TV, but it probably wasn't a whole lot.
And in a way, no other movie that I can remember has ever done that ever.
I know. And there are movies that now could 100% do that. Like any of the Marvel movies could. I mean, they kind of do that with the little after credit scenes, sort of,
kinda.
but they don't show you the next movie. They hint at it.
Yeah,
You know?
they'll show you a little quick scene, but this one was like a full-blown
It was
trailer.
literally the whole movie.
And it showed you almost everything. And it was just so odd. But, you know...
And it was quite apparent that they had legit had the whole movie filmed already.
Yeah.
Like they just literally had it in the can and just waited a year to put it out.
Oh, yeah.
Because like all of the scenes in that trailer were all the exact shot scenes in the actual movie.
Yeah. Yeah, there were no all of a sudden scenes that were in the trailer that weren't in the movie, which you could, like, there are movies today that will come out and there are scenes in the early trailers that they eventually cut.
Yeah.
But this one, there's not a single scene. Like, it's a perfect trailer. It's like, yeah, we've got this whole thing shot, cut, it's ready to roll. And part of me thinks that maybe they threw this on there as because the second movie was pretty dark and it did end on kind of a downer of a note. That maybe they put this happy trailer at the end to kind of lift people's spirits because it is Back to the Future. It's supposed to be funny and nice and all
I think I agree with that. Like especially like for kids too.
Yeah.
It's like well, like if you were young enough or whatever, and you would have seen that in the theater, like that could have like legit affected you.
Oh yeah.
Like Doc is gone. Oh no, he's not. Marty's gonna find him, you know, in this next movie. And by the way, here's like 5 minutes of the movie that you can watch right now, you know.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because it says to be concluded.
It does.
And like that is hilarious. I've never seen that before or since. The end of Back to the Future 1. Does that say to be continued?
It didn't originally. I think maybe in the once 2 and 3 were
totally
shot.
Because it does now.
It does now. They've changed it, but the original release never had that.
Okay, because like you're right. I also saw or read that like it wasn't going to have a sequel.
Right.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that's like it's kind of like Star Wars, where initially Star Wars was just Star Wars, but then it was added. A New Hope was added to it.
Right. Yeah.
Like later on.
Because George Lucas had no idea if this movie was going to succeed or fail, and it was kind of an independent
He wanted
venture.
to make more, but he wasn't sure if it would be financially feasible to do so.
Yeah. Yeah. He had little treatments and all that, but he really didn't have it all fleshed out at the time, and which we will get to in our Star Wars episodes. We'll have a lot to say about that.
Oh,
but
boy.
when we get into Back to the Future 3, I think one thing that sticks out to me that makes it weak. Like, there are really good things about Back to the Future 3, and I will say it's a fine film. Like, I don't hate Back to the Future 3.
No.
But I will say personally, and this will be interesting to see if you agree with this. My big problem with Back to the Future 3 is the whole Clara Clayton love angle with Doc. I didn't buy it. I thought it was weak sauce. I thought it was horrible motivation for Doc. I just don't see him where he's so concerned. I mean, and again, with the character of Doc being so concerned with the space-time continuum, and he's so rock solid on that. To me, the movie didn't do enough to make me buy that this lady is going to sweep Doc off his feet and make him completely go nuts and change his mind about that.
Yeah. I guess I would agree with that. I think I'm at a bias just because I really like Mary Steenburgen as an actress. I guess.
Okay.
But like, because she just kind of had like an innocence as well.
Yeah. Oh, she did.
But yeah, I guess I've never really thought about that. But that makes sense because you're right. Like he is very concerned. But then you also have the thing where like in the first movie when he puts together the note and reads it so then he knows to wear the bulletproof vest, he's like, I thought the hell with it, about the space-time continuum. So I
think I kind of write that off because the friendship sells that for me.
That's
true. Where
well,
Doc...
and then you're saying that this one, it doesn't sell you enough on the relationship or the
right
for you to believe that.
It's a little too convenient.
It's very quick,
and it's fast.
But I mean, love at first sight, I guess.
But
Doc doesn't seem like he's that kind of a dude.
Right, the whole puppy love thing. It just didn't click for me. Now, again, if it clicks for you guys out there, God bless you, man. Like I'm not saying that it's a bad movie. Like I said, like it's actually really well shot, and it's. For the most part, there's still a lot of classic scenes in there, between everyone, There's a lot to love about Back to the Future 3 personally, and the one thing well, there's two things I didn't like in particular. One being the Claire Clayton thing, the second being the ending. But you know, those are kind of the things that, and we'll get to the ending before. I don't want to jump all over, but
No.
I don't have a lot to say about Back to the Future 3 except that I really liked it.
I'll agree with you that, and like I think I kind of alluded to this earlier. Like, it's a good movie. It's not something you would forget, but it's not super memorable.
Right.
They rehash some stuff. Like there's like I said, the Cafe 80 scene, or the initial diner scene where he asks for something with no sugar and the guy gives him coffee. I mean, he kind of does that when he goes into the bar and he has
Right.
the whole Biff Tannen or Mad Dog Tannen thing,
Yeah.
So it's like they kind of rehash that, but I mean, there's a lot of aspects to it that are like, they didn't really touch on in any of the other movies. So, and I mean, just the fact that it's set in the Wild West makes it that much different too, but they didn't completely rely on only that to set it apart
Right.
from the other movies. So
There are things that I do like, that it actually kind of takes things from Back to the Future 2, and Marty uses those in Back to the Future 3. The hoverboard's still a thing. Makes sense. He still has it. So it's kind of fun to see that kind of, at least there's a little bit more of a usage there. But then also the whole Clint Eastwood thing.
Yeah.
Because when in Back to the Future 2...
what kind of stupid name is that?
in Back to the Future 2, when Marty goes to to Biff's hotel in the alternate 1985, Biff is in there with a couple of ladies in the jacuzzi watching a Clint Eastwood flick.
Yeah.
And the guy, he had, and it's the scene where Clint Eastwood, he's got the plate on his chest and he gets shot and he's like, oh, bulletproof vest, freaking genius, and Marty gets that idea, and we're gonna see that. You
Yeah.
don't know that at the time, but he's going to take that and use that idea.
Like, it's almost like I totally forgot about that. Yeah, it's like you set something up in the second movie that moves into the third movie.
Yeah.
And I guess that's more prevalent now, but like, that's just weird to me. Like,
Yeah.
back then,
And,
Like,
and it works so nicely because you think in the second one he's just watching a Clint Eastwood flick. Okay, cool, but it actually means something. Like Marty sees that, and then he's in the Old West. He's like, and he mentions the name Clint Eastwood because he just saw that scene with Clint Eastwood on it, not too long ago. What's your name? And he makes
Yeah.
it up, Clint Eastwood.
that's what you have to realize, is the timeline is really short. It's
Yeah.
really limited. So like, yeah, where he is actually using that metal plate from seeing that movie was probably just like a few days or something.
Yeah, it
or like a
can't be-
week.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, and he'd remember that because it's an Old West flick. He's in the Old West.
Yeah.
It's fresh on his mind.
Well, I mean, his name is Clint Eastwood.
That too, yes. What kind of stupid name is that? But yeah, so there's a lot to like about this film. As in all films, they have the whole scene with Biff and the manure. That always has to be a thing. That's one thing that makes it through all three movies. I will say the one thing that I have a real problem with is the whole ending, and not the time machine getting destroyed. Fantastic. That like it gets obliterated by that train,
Yeah.
and I have no problem with that. The one thing I do have the problem with is Doc coming back on a flying steam engine like thing.
I understand completely what you're talking about, because like it kind of, you just see this time machine being destroyed,
Yeah.
and like that's like, wow, we've like, because it becomes a character throughout these three
It
films,
does.
and it's like you just saw this character die,
Mhm.
and now Doc is nowhere to be found, so like he can't build a new one,
Yeah.
So when he comes in this new time machine, it just kind of negates everything that just happened, so it makes it way less of a thing.
And it also negates his sacrifice to stay back with Claire Clayton
Yeah.
in the first place.
Exactly.
And-
if he was just going to build another time machine, then like who cares?
Yeah, exactly. And and it also nullifies kind of earlier in the film where it's like we don't have the parts to build a time machine.
exactly.
Well, then what the hell happened?
Yeah.
All of a sudden you have all these parts.
You're 100 years even further into the future, and you've got these parts to not only make a time machine, but to make a better time machine than you
Yeah.
had in the first place.
Yeah.
From something more even ridiculous than a DeLorean.
Right. And
Yeah, I get that.
and so the whole thing, it just it because it kind of just nullifies
they-
it all.
They wanted to end it on a good note.
And I know they did. I mean,
Yeah.
they wanted to have it kind of be happy and all that kind of stuff. But I think I think it should have kept some of that sad tone.
Yeah.
Because it's a friendship lost.
They could have done something similar.
I think,
Yeah, I don't know.
I think something along the lines of, and maybe this is a little too sad, but I think, Marty could have gone to the library and looked up like the Old West thing and seen Doc's obituary, where it talks about what a wonderful life he had or
Yeah.
whatnot.
Or and they had like 2-3 children or
Right.
whatever, and yeah.
Right. But I think something like that, where, it's still somber, but, you learn that Doc had a good life in the end and that his sacrifice was worth it.
Yeah.
And he died a happy man, surrounded by family, or however you want to do it. And then you don't have that goofball time machine thing, which never pays off anyways because
No.
it's the last movie in
That's
the
it.
trilogy. So
Yeah.
who cares?
I'm wondering, well, and I would assume no, because they had the whole to be concluded thing, but I'm wondering if they really wanted to go somewhere with that.
Maybe.
I mean, I'm assuming no because of the whole to be concluded thing, but like,
Right.
who knows? Maybe they
And-
wanted to that sliver, leave it open just a little bit in case they wanted to do something.
Did they ever
else,
make
but-
a toy based on that train
Oh,
design?
Who knows?
Maybe
Probably.
it was a merchandising thing too tied in because
I don't- There must have been toys for this movie.
I would
but
think so.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I don't like you always see Star Wars toys and
Yeah.
stuff like that, but like hell, you even see like Battlefield Earth toys and whatnot. But like I don't know if I ever remember seeing like a DeLorean or a Michael J. Fox.
Right, because
character.
you think those would have flown right off the shelves.
I'm sure, and if they did, you would thought you would have seen them.
Yeah.
Now.
I'll
still.
have to look that up. Maybe
I'll have to look. There probably are, and we sound like idiots. But you know.
right, there's probably someone out there in the audience. Yeah, I have the whole
I have the
set.
lunchbox.
I have the steam engine, with the action figures, man.
There's a Jules and a Verne.
Jules and Verne. Oh my
Ugh.
gosh. So the ending gets to me a little bit because it's kind of like, okay, then why did I watch this movie?
Yeah.
You're kind of undoing everything. So what's the point?
You're right. It basically makes the entire movie, other than the fact where it's like, okay, Doc could have possibly gotten shot by Mad Dog Tannen, stuff that's actually happening in the moment, which could have. But at the same time, it's like, well, no, not really, because like some other Marty's going to come back and stop that from happening,
Yeah.
It's just, when you get, that's one the thing, when you get into time travel like that, it becomes a real iffy thing. And I think this movie did better by staying in the one time period. It made it
And
easier for people to understand, I guess.
And
but-
again, the other thing that it undoes, now that I'm thinking about it, and again, I don't mean to nitpick this movie to death, the whole point, especially of the second film, is that there is a cost to this time travel thing. And it undoes the cost completely
yeah,
of time travel in and of itself. And apparently Doc completely betrays his earlier self of, oh no, we've got to destroy this time machine, and, because there's just too much of a cost. Time travel is the problem, not the solution. That's the whole point of these films. Time travel is always the problem. It's
Yep.
never the solution.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, the very end of the movie even undoes that. So that's why, in my head, I don't like the third one. Some people do. Some people can forgive it. I'm totally cool with that. Again, this is not a hill I'm willing to die on. It's I'm totally cool. If you dig part 3 and you hate part 2 with a passion, more power to you, man. Like, I get it. Some people don't like Back to the Future 2 for whatever reason. Now, if you guys are listening to this and you want to shoot a comment or whatever you want to do, let us know, because I would love to know, like, some logical reasons why people just don't like it. I'm not going to debate it, but I've never really heard an argument for, like, oh, I don't like Back to the Future 2 and here's why,
Yeah.
from an actual fan. So I'd be interested in hearing that. But that all being said, I think my the first Back to the Future I like the best, and they, second one second best, third one third best. They kind of go down a little bit with each film, is how that's my personal view. But not that Back to the Future 3 is a bad film. It's just the one that I watched the least because the ending kind of undoes everything for me. So I kind of inherently feel like the movie's kind of a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike the other ones where I actually feel like I get something out of those. And it's kind of a shame, even more, that the third one's such a waste of time when the second one has a great cliffhanger ending that leads into that film.
Yeah.
But that's just my take on that. Do you have any closing remarks before we wrap this sucker up?
I mean, I think I would agree with you there. I think if you can kind of turn off your brain a little bit for the third one and just enjoy it as like a.
Don't use that. Don't use that term.
And
We're
just-
gonna get into that in a future episode. Okay.
Just enjoy it as like a fun romp, and don't think about it too much. I think you could still enjoy it, but yeah, I don't know. I think I might agree with you. I think I would go 1, 2, and 3 as well.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, like I said, originally I would have been 1, 3, and 2, but not just because of what you've said. In subsequent watchings of 2 and kind of finding out more about it and stuff like that,
Yeah.
I actually appreciate it a lot more.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, hey. Yeah, that's why we come out agreeing in the end. We had a very similar experience. So yeah, but again, you haven't seen these movies. Why were you listening to this the whole time? Go watch them. But anyway, I think that's everything that we have here for today. So we're gonna head on off, and we'll be back next week with another episode. We'll probably do something a little different, and we will see you guys then.
Sounds good.